I hadn't planned to leave the office early that Tuesday, but the headache that pulsed behind my eyes made the decision for me. The elevator hummed as it descended, and I rubbed the smooth sleeve of my dove-gray silk blouse, an unconscious comfort I'd learned during late nights of quiet victories. Outside, the city air was sharper than usual, tinged with autumn leaves and the distant smell of roasted chestnuts from a street cart. When I reached my neighborhood, the sun had dipped low, washing the row of brownstones in a honeyed glow. My sneakers whispered against the cracked pavement as I climbed the familiar front steps of the house I'd once called home. I'd meant only to grab a file I'd left behind, something from an old storage box my parents still kept in the attic. But the front door was ajar. My phone buzzed in my palm, but I silenced it, frowning at the sound of muffled voices inside. Mom's voice. And Dad's. I pushed the door open an inch more and froze. They were in my old bedroom, backs to me, surrounded by half-filled boxes and the scent of dust and cedar. My father's hands gripped the handles of a suitcase I hadn't touched in years. My mother folded my faded college sweatshirt, her face a mix of resignation and something I couldn't quite read. "It's for her own good," she whispered. "Forcing her into that tiny studio will teach her," Dad replied. "She'll thank us when she realizes she can't keep up the charade." A slow, cold ache bloomed in my chest. They were packing my life away to help me move into a place I hadn't agreed to. I stepped fully into the room. "Interesting strategy," I said, my voice sharper than the October air. I can still feel the weight of that night in my chest, the kind of heaviness that never really leaves you. I was 21, barely old enough to order a glass of wine, but already old enough to know when I was being quietly pushed out of my own life. It started in the living room of our old two-story house in suburban Connecticut. The late summer heat clung to the curtains, and the air smelled faintly of lemon polish and my mother's lavender hand cream. My parents sat across from me on the cream-colored couch, hands folded too neatly, voices too measured. "Madison," my dad began, his tone clipped, almost rehearsed. "We think it's time you considered something more manageable." My mother jumped in before I could speak. "A smaller space. A fresh start. You know the studio above Maple Street is still available. We could help you move." Their words fell like stones. I blinked at them, unsure I'd heard correctly. "Move." My own voice cracked. "Into that shoebox apartment?" They exchanged a glance, the kind parents share when they've already decided. My mother smoothed an invisible crease in her skirt. "It will be easier for you. Less overwhelming. We've already started packing some of your things, just to help." The sting of betrayal burned behind my eyes. They hadn't even asked me. It wasn't concern. It was control, wrapped in polite phrases. My hands trembled, and I pressed them into my thighs to hide it. I thought of all the late nights I'd spent sketching designs for the interior design business I dreamed of starting, the quiet hours when the house slept and I plotted a life bigger than anyone expected. And yet, here they were, shoving me toward something smaller, literally and figuratively. "You think I can't handle my own life?" The question came out sharper than I intended. My father looked away. "We just don't want you to fail." The word fail hung there like smoke. It was Grandma Rose who steadied me that night. She found me on the back porch, tears streaking my face, the humid air sticking to my skin. Without a word, she pressed a small brass key into my palm. "This belonged to my first studio," she whispered, her voice like warm honey. "You'll need your own door, Madison. One no one else can close." I closed my fingers around the key. Something inside me locked into place. That night I decided, if they wanted me small, I would build something too big to be ignored. I wish I could say the road ahead unfolded like some perfectly lit movie montage, but the truth is, the first months on my own were messy and raw. I took a sublet in a cramped walk-up in Queens, 3 flights of creaky stairs and a door that stuck in the winter. The kitchen smelled faintly of burnt toast from some long-gone tenant, and every time I turned on the faucet, the pipes groaned like they were protesting my presence. But to me, it was freedom. The day after I left my parents' house, I sat on the hardwood floor with a cardboard box as my table and sketched out a plan. I didn't have much: a second-hand laptop, a battered notebook, and the small leather journal Aunt Ruth had given me years before. The one embossed with the words, "Build the life you dream," not the one you're given. Her quiet faith in me pulsed through every page. By day, I worked as a receptionist at a design studio downtown. I answered phones, fetched lattes, and smiled through the patronizing comments of interns who thought my job was beneath them. By night, I devoured tutorials on web design and branding until my eyes ached. I scribbled notes in Aunt Ruth's journal, my handwriting slanting more fiercely as the months passed. Learn CSS. Build sample portfolio. Pitch at least one client this week. The first tiny break came on a rain-slick Thursday evening. A local bakery owner, a silver-haired man with the warmest laugh, overheard me chatting with a coworker about logos. He asked if I could design something fresh for his shop. I charged him $50 and stayed up until 3 a.m. perfecting the swirl of a cupcake into the lettering. When he unveiled the new sign, customers actually stopped to take photos. That was the moment I realized I could do this. Soon after, I met Grace Whitmore, the studio's senior art director. Grace was the kind of woman who wore vintage Chanel jackets and never apologized for her opinions. One night, after everyone else had gone home, she found me hunched over my laptop, teaching myself animation. "You're wasting your talent at the front desk," she said, sliding a coffee toward me. Her voice held no pity, only certainty. Grace started giving me small freelance projects, then introduced me to her network of clients. Each gig was a step: a boutique hotel in Brooklyn, a fitness brand in LA, a nonprofit in Chicago. I worked until sunrise more times than I care to admit, but every invoice I sent out felt like another brick in the life I was quietly building. I didn't post about my growing client list. My parents still thought I was barely scraping by, maybe even considering coming back home. I let them think that. There was a strange power in their underestimation, like wearing an invisibility cloak while I built my empire. By the end of the second year, I'd saved enough to rent a sun-drenched loft in Williamsburg and register my own design agency, Whitmore and Hale. Grace insisted we put both our names on the door. When the sign went up outside our glass-walled office, I stood on the sidewalk and traced Aunt Ruth's journal words with my thumb. "Build the life you dream." I had. And nobody back home had the faintest idea. The soft click of the elevator doors opening echoed through the marble lobby of my building. I stood just inside the entrance of my loft, the scent of freshly brewed espresso still curling through the air. My heart ticked faster, not from nerves, but from the sheer weight of what was about to unfold. Through the glass-paneled door, I watched my parents approach. My father, Michael, stiff in his familiar navy blazer, his jaw set in that same resolute line I'd known since childhood. My mother, Linda, wore a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Behind them, my younger brother Jason trailed, glancing around with wide-eyed curiosity. I opened the door slowly, letting the quiet grandeur of the space speak before I did. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, gilding the oak floors and catching the edges of the framed photographs that lined the far wall. A sweeping city skyline stretched beyond the glass, a living mural of ambition. Jason's mouth parted. "Wow." My mother's eyes darted to the abstract painting above the fireplace, a commissioned piece from a rising artist whose work had been featured at Art Basel. She blinked rapidly, as if unsure whether to comment or simply breathe. "This is yours?" she asked finally, her voice a fragile whisper. "Yes," I said, leaning casually against the kitchen island. The marble countertop gleamed under the soft pendant lights. Every inch of it. My father's brows knitted together. "I thought." He stopped, the words caught somewhere between confusion and disbelief. "You told us you were managing." "I am managing," I replied evenly. "Better than you ever imagined." Their gazes swept the room, taking in the bespoke furniture, the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with rare first editions, the subtle but unmistakable details of wealth. But it wasn't just the material markers that held their attention. It was the undeniable evidence of a life fully built. Without them. I gestured toward the framed photo of me with my mentor, Eleanor Blake, at the opening of my first design studio. "This is my second space," I said, letting the words land. The first one is across town. Both profitable. Both mine. Jason gawked. You own two? Yes, I said with a small, measured smile.
Two.
And counting. My mother pressed a hand to her chest, her voice barely audible. But how? We thought you. She broke off, swallowing hard. You never told us. You never asked, I said gently, but there was no mistaking the steel in my tone. The last time I tried to talk about my dreams, you packed up my things. You decided my life for me, before I'd even chosen it myself. The silence that followed was thick, almost tangible. My father shifted his weight, staring at the floor as though searching for an answer there. This, he gestured vaguely to the space to me. This is impressive. But why keep it from us? I held his gaze. Because I needed to know who I was without your approval. I needed to succeed without anyone holding a measuring tape to my worth. Jason cleared his throat softly, eyes flicking between us. She did it on her own, he said almost proudly. My father's shoulders sagged. For the first time, I saw something other than authority in his posture, something almost like regret. I underestimated you, he said quietly. The words landed like a small earthquake. My mother's eyes shimmered with something she couldn't quite name, pride, perhaps, or the ache of realizing how wrong she'd been. I let the silence breathe. The skyline behind me blazed in the late afternoon sun, a silent witness to every sleepless night, every risk, every quiet triumph. This, I said finally, sweeping my hand toward the room, toward the life I'd built, is what happens when you trust yourself more than anyone else's plan. Their stunned faces reflected in the glass, caught between the city's golden light and the truth they could no longer ignore. I let the silence settle between us like dust in a sunbeam. The old me would have rushed to fill it, to soften the edges, to make everyone comfortable. But that woman, the one who used to shrink whenever someone doubted her, was gone. Mom's eyes darted around my living room again, as if the walls themselves whispered secrets she hadn't earned. Dad sat stiff on the couch, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles whitened. I know you thought you were helping me, I began, my voice steady. But packing my things behind my back wasn't help. It was control. And that ends today. My mother opened her mouth, probably to explain it all away, but I lifted my palm.
Please.
Let me finish. They fell quiet. For once, they were listening. I took a breath, feeling the cool leather of the armchair beneath my fingertips. I'm not here to punish you. But if we're going to have a relationship, things have to change. On all sides. Dad shifted, his gaze fixed on the floor. First, I said, you need to trust me with my own life. No more surprise visits, no helpful rearrangements, no backdoor plans. If you have concerns, we talk. As adults. If you can't respect that boundary, you don't get access to this part of my life. Mom swallowed hard. Emily. My name's Maya, Mom. My voice cracked just enough to reveal the hurt. Say it like you believe I'm grown. She nodded, her eyes wet. Maya. Second, I continued. Dad, I need you to take care of your health. No more skipping appointments, because you're too busy. You've spent years managing everyone else's lives. It's time you manage your own. I'll help you find a trainer or a doctor, but you have to show up. His shoulders slumped, the fight draining from him. And finally, I said softer now, I need both of you to start pursuing something that makes you happy outside of me. A hobby, a trip, anything. Your lives can't be about controlling mine. You deserve more than that, and so do I. Mom reached for Dad's hand, tentative. He let her take it. You think we can do that? I asked quietly. For a moment, there was only the hum of the city beyond my windows. Then Dad lifted his eyes to mine. We were wrong, Maya, he said, the words slow but clear. We thought we were keeping you safe. We didn't see we were just keeping you small. A lump rose in my throat, but I stood my ground.
Mom squeezed his hand.
We'll do better, she whispered. We'll learn how to let you live. I finally exhaled, the tension slipping from my shoulders like a heavy coat I no longer needed to wear. You'll have to prove it, I said, but there was no anger left, just a quiet strength. This isn't about me winning. It's about us starting over. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere far below, a sharp reminder of the life waiting beyond these walls. I glanced at the silver bracelet around my wrist, the one Aunt Lila gave me the night I left home, engraved with a single word: rise.
I had.
And now, so could we. I watched them from the balcony as the late afternoon sun melted into streaks of tangerine and rose. The city's heartbeat pulsed beneath us, car horns, snippets of music from rooftop bars, the distant hiss of the subway. For the first time in years, those sounds felt like a song instead of a warning. My mother stepped closer to the railing, her hands tucked inside the sleeves of the cardigan I'd given her that morning. She wasn't speaking much, just breathing in the skyline as though she'd never truly seen it before. My father stood a few feet behind, silent too. The stubborn line in his jaw finally softened. They'd begun, in small and halting ways, to keep the promises they'd made when I laid out my conditions. Mom had signed up for the art class she used to talk about before life got busy with everyone else's needs. Dad had started volunteering at the local community garden, a place he once dismissed as wasting time in dirt. Their changes weren't dramatic, but they were real. And I had changed, too. Forgiveness isn't a single decision, it's a slow unfolding, like the evening sky. The old ache still flickered now and then, but it no longer ruled me. I'd built a life of my own making. The studio, the thriving design business, the quiet strength that no one could pack away. In the corner of my living room, the old silver compass from Aunt Lydia rested on the bookshelf. I ran my fingers across its cool surface, the tiny arrow still pointing north. Find your own true direction, she'd whispered years ago when I felt completely lost. That simple gift had guided me more than she could have known. I turned back toward my parents, the people who once tried to shrink my life to fit their fears. They looked different now, not smaller but human. We were all still learning how to meet each other without the old armor. "Thank you for coming," I said quietly, my voice steady but warm. My mother smiled, a tentative, hopeful curve of her lips. "Thank you for letting us." The city lights blinked on one by one, like 1,000 tiny confirmations. I closed the balcony door and felt the compass's weight in my palm. No one would ever decide my path again. I had already found my way, and it pointed, unshakably, to me.